Can you be a guest on my podcast? Probably not. And let me tell you why. This is Paul. This is the Podcast Report at thepodcastreport.com. I get texts, I get tweets, I get emails, I get Facebook notifications, I get Instagram pushes, I get LinkedIn updates, I get on a regular basis questions from people who want to be on the podcast report. And the funny thing is they all have one thing in common. None of them have anything to teach you, the podcaster. And if I'm doing a good job of being a podcast host, why in the world would I bring someone on the show who doesn't have something for you? And even more importantly, why would someone who doesn't have something for you want your attention, want your time, want to be in front of you? I was actually looking at a video at Ad Age a few minutes ago, and the thing that was interesting at Ad Age was they forced me to watch a video that was completely and totally not something for me. It was for a medication for a disease I don't have. And I certainly feel sorry for the people who have that disease. But making me watch that commercial, there was no way to skip out of it. There was no way to leave it. There was no way to say, I don't want any more of this, or I don't have that disease. I simply had to watch it. And it went on for like over a minute. I'm like, forget this. I'm not going to watch this thing. And this is what's happening in podcasts for people who are interviewing anything that moves. And we have a couple people to blame here. Number one, your message, the more targeted your message is, the better you're going to serve someone. And the more targeted your message is, you're going to know exactly who it is that you want to reach. And the more targeted that your message is, you're going to spend your time, your effort, and your attention reaching those people. If you don't know what your message is, if your podcast is just, hey, I have a podcast where I talk about stuff, then A, it's going to die a miserable death very, very soon. But B, please don't take my audience with you. I mean this in the nicest way possible, but the fact of the matter is the podcast report is to serve podcasters who are trying to figure out the real business of podcasting. If I bring on someone who read in some article somewhere that if you spam enough people, you're going to get on a show, I'm not serving my podcast audience. And I'm certainly not teaching how to make a good podcast and how to do good business on the podcast. So yeah, it's not going to happen. You're probably not going to be a guest on my podcast, but I want to go deeper than that. I want to examine this idea of why people are thinking that maybe this is a good idea to spam people with questions of whether or not you can be on their podcast. It goes back to internet marketing. It goes back to bad internet marketing. There are a number of internet marketers out there who are selling courses, who are selling classes, who are selling ebooks, who are selling Kindle books, who are selling products based on this idea that you don't even need a podcast. What you do is you want to go on other podcasts. And whereas that might make sense in a little tiny 1% of the world type of situation, it simply is not true. And it simply is not a good strategy, because let's face it, if you get on a podcast and you get a podcast listener and you've got something for that podcast listener, the last thing you want to do is not have a podcast for them to listen to. I'll say that again. If you are on a podcast and you've got a podcast listener, the last thing you want to do is have something that they don't want to listen to, something that they have no need to listen to, that they have no desire to listen to. So if you are going to make the podcast scene to get new people, for the love of Pete, for the love of all that is holy, get yourself a podcast to send people to. If you are looking for the quick hack, if you're looking for the quick thing, don't do it in podcasting. Don't do it with podcasters, because, well, it just doesn't make sense and it just doesn't work. And if you get onto a podcast, here's the thing. When I say work, I mean work from a it doesn't reach the audience that you're looking for. If you find a podcaster that is willing to take your random, I keep hitting the microphone there. If you take a podcast that is willing to take a random person about a random subject, you know what this means? This means they don't have an audience. And so not only are you wasting that person's time, that person's audience's time, but you're actually wasting your own time because you're not going to reach anybody. Now, there are services out there that will get you on podcasts, and buyer beware, be careful. I had one on a previous episode, and you can go ahead and take a listen to that, but poorly targeted. I want to be on my podcast. I want to be on your podcast. I want to be on Eddie's podcast because I have something to say is a really, really bad idea. Now, flip side, I have a tightly knit audience of podcasters. Many of them are actually watching me record this episode live on Facebook. Hello, everyone. If you guys want to make a comment, I will take some questions at the end of this. If you have a tightly targeted message, if you have a hack, if you have something for podcasters, I would love to bring you on the show. If you've got something that can help a podcaster do more real business, I would love to introduce you to my audience. But how do you know? It's not a feeling. It's not I came up with this idea. It's proof. It's things that work. It's things that are in the field. It's something that you want to share that someone can do better with. So, can you be a guest on my show? Probably not, unless you've got something for my audience. And if you have something for my audience, tell me what it is that you have for your audience. And then don't even ask about being on the show. Just say, hey, Paul, I've got this for your audience. I'll ask you to be on the show. If you are searching around podcasting, looking for ways to get on other people's shows because you heard somewhere that's a good idea, it's probably not. And for goodness sake, if it is a good idea, send them to something other than a website or a web page. Send them to a podcast of your own. This is the Podcast Report at thepodcastreport.com. I'm recording this one live in front of a Facebook audience. If you go to the show notes for this page, I'll even link to this video. A couple of you are watching, and if somebody wants to make a comment or ask a question, I will go for that. If not, we will line up and get this thing published out there to the real world. If you want to subscribe to the Podcast Report, you can head out to thepodcastreport.com/Apple to get on Apple. You can head out to thepodcastreport.com/Google to get it at Google, /Stitcher to get it at Stitcher, /Pandora to get it at Pandora. Thepodcastreport.com/podcasting platform of your choice is probably the great place to get this show. Subscribe so the automatic stuff comes to you at the time and the place and the device of your choosing. Again, I would love anyone on the show who has something for my audience, but if you don't, no, you can't be a guest on my show. You probably shouldn't be a guest on my show, and you should probably stop asking to be a guest on someone else's show. Have a great day. Bye.